The Confessional is brought to you by Locker Room, the groundbreaking fan engagement platform turning your physical touchpoints into digital access points. With a simple scan of QR codes or tap on NFC-enabled merchandise, your once anonymous followers become active members with verified fan IDs across your whole ecosystem. Connect fans globally through matchday rituals, vibrant communities, exclusive content and experiences, rewards, digital memories, and much more. Own the relationship, own the data, compound fan value, and unlock direct revenue streams from your biggest supporters. Find out more at www.lockerroom.app. And now, on with the show.
Welcome everyone, I'm Roger Mitchell, and as always, this is The Confessional. Today we've got one of Australia's favourite sons, I would argue, Mr. Anthony AYNE, serial entrepreneur, and could have made it basketball star, if truth be told. Made an amazing career, started off in marketing and advertising, built his own agency, as these kind of people tend to do. Off of that, spun off a streaming platform based around AI and personalization called Aura, which he took into the sports industry. In the middle of all of this success, as a side hustle, he was building an empire of bars in Canberra. And now, believe it or not, he's made a complete change in his life and is getting involved in the world of surfing. And AYNE, I would have to say, is one of the most charming people you can come across. He seems to make a connection immediately with almost anybody. That's my direct experience. And I'm going to see today if that has been a strength or a weakness in his dealings with the world of sport. And AYNE, welcome to The Confessional.
Thank you, Roger. What a lovely intro. I don't think I've ever heard anyone describe me in all those lovely terms, especially not you, to be fair, but it's a pleasure for me to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Wonderful, wonderful. Of course, just a little bit of context, Ant and I have known each other for over 5 years now. I can't remember how many it is. And we took the journey of Aura together. And at the times we have physically been in each other's company, strange stuff seems to happen. Like when he hosted me in Australia, I arrived from the airport. He took me to this Jeep racing track, which I think was instrumental in me detaching a retina. And he said, "Don't be such a wuss, get on with it."
It's just not built the same over in Europe, maybe, compared to the Aussies. It wasn't even a Jeep. It was a little buggy. There was a couple of bumps,
but you were
maybe,
going pretty fast and it was bumpy. I went back to my eye person here in Como, and she looked and she said, "Have you been doing anything extreme in the last month or so?" I said, "Well, now that you mention that." And for the listeners, I told Anne about this experience because I was quite worried, and he sent me back a gif of these eyeballs on the springs.
I did too.
Zero sympathy.
You're going to be all right.
Australian
Everything's
way.
all right.
All right, my friend, let's get into this because I think this is going to be an important conversation for you, for me, and for the listeners, hopefully, as well. Question number one, for what and to whom do you need to ask forgiveness?
I thought about this one. I listened to a bunch of the other podcasts, and I think it's probably every investor and staff member from the Aura days that ever heard me say the phrase, "We're pretty close now." I think the sun is close to dying on a cosmic scale, and so the word close can mean a lot of things that can be a little arbitrary. So, no, I mean, look, it's a slight joke in there, but in all honesty, I had a lot of people back me. I had a lot of people believe in the vision. And, there's some incredible learnings out of those types of experiences where you kind of give it everything and you're all in. And if things don't quite pan out as you want, invariably people are going to be let down, including letting yourself down, to be honest. But, the good thing is I'm still extremely close with, all the staff, the investors. Everything's on great terms. And so that matters a lot to me as well.
Well, let's investigate that a little bit because people maybe don't know the context. If I was asked to give a summary of why you got into that situation, I'd put it down to two things. One, is the incredible slowness in governments in supporting innovators when they say that they will give you tax breaks for you investing in innovation, and then they don't. And the second one on a similar theme is the slowness and perhaps the lack of honesty in the sports industry, where they will tell you they're going to do something and then they do something else, which they normally cover up by saying, we have put you in the process and it will work out, but be patient. Looking back on now, what happened to Aura and what you had to do with it, what do you think was the main reason you just didn't get the traction you needed at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, look, those things you mentioned are spot-on factors, but there's more than that as well, to be fair. I don't just blame, the sports industry or the people that we dealt with. I mean, the final death knell was, yes, the Australian government owed me $8 million in cash. Funnily enough, since I had to kind of, I'm trying to think of the right words for it. I think in the US, it's like a Chapter 11. I had to put it into 11. Administration. Yeah. The administrator contacts the tax office and they pay the money 48 hours later.
They did not, did they?
Yeah, they did. Well, most of it. The last payment's still coming through.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So the irony of me fighting them, this bureaucratical beast for like 3 years, whilst trying to keep everyone motivated and keen, knowing that the cash was just kind of burning down, trying to get deals over the line. There was a lot. When I think about it now, at the time I was like, just go. But there was a lot to deal with. So that was definitely like in about 12 months, we went from, I was like, oh man, this money's not coming. And we'd had access to that money in previous years. There was a change of government and it just stopped, and everything was reviewed and audited. And we went from 70 staff to 50 staff to 30 staff to 14 staff done in like 12 months, not even. And so even at that point, I could tell halfway through, because I was like, we're trying to get there, but it's like, how are you going to service contracts? How are you going to, stop bottlenecks in software development and things like that when you're losing resources? You've got to manage the culture of the business and keep people excited and motivated, hoping that there is a silver lining, or, this money comes in and then all of a sudden everything changes. But outside of that, I think there's some other factors. So we started building this technology in 2018, and we had some really good wins with it early. Then COVID happened, which is obviously disastrous for the sports industry. We were lucky, a poison pill, I'm going to say, because we had pretty significant funding. We were able to, for the most part, get through that time. And we kept building and building and building and building. And by the time the sports industry came back, we probably built too much. That's the lesson I kind of learned, without iterating and testing stuff sort of along the way. So all of a sudden our platform was pretty massive in terms of what it could do. The last thing that sort of happened is towards the end of kind of COVID and the world's getting back to normal, I think there was about 6 deals we were really close to that we lost. 4 of them were to Microsoft and 2 of them were to Sony. And you're familiar with this, Rog. And I remember just thinking at that time, I was like, oh, we have got to change gears, like in terms of shift our whole strategy and our thinking, because we can't keep going up against these titans. We're going to lose every time. And it didn't matter if our technology was better. We're the small Australian startup versus, the US kind of or European behemoth. And so, there's a mixture of those factors. I don't think it was any kind of one. I think the people we dealt with for the most part were pretty fair. A few of them,
really?
Things dragged on.
Really?
Well, things dragged on with a bunch of maybe more than you would hope, or there was kind of promises made that maybe didn't eventuate. But I take that stuff with a grain of salt, because, if other factors, some of those other things had kind of come along, we would have had either more time or more runs on the board or whatever else to make those decisions a little bit easier. I built great relationships with those people, and I actually still cherish a lot of those. And so, people have got to do their jobs. I get it. And, building a great relationship with certain sports organizations over 3 years to have Sony knock us out in the very 11th hour, of course it's frustrating, but I don't blame. At the end of the day, there's boards, there's people that make decisions above, certain, the pay grade of people I was dealing with, and that's just the way things go sometimes.
Let me ask about this thing you said about the investors. We can talk about the staff if you want as well, but I think these are the important things about a podcast like The Confessional. Obviously, I know the story, and there was certain people or maybe one certain person who backed you all the way along. When you realised that, because knowing the personality you are, I don't think it would have come quickly, this. When you realised that you may have to let this person down, what did that do to your psyche when you were thinking about, no, this isn't going to work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really powerful kind of life moment to kind of ponder. Like I'm unreasonably optimistic by nature. I have a lot of energy and I love to get after stuff, and very much have a never say die attitude. And then sometimes life says, oh, this is going to die. And so you sort of have to face that. And then, look, the good thing is I'm pretty transparent with people. I, have good relationships. They knew things were sort of coming along. And so there was an eventuality of that made that conversation a little bit easier. I'm still super close with, especially the person I know you're talking about. They're effectively backing me into this next business now anyway, going, look, the feedback is, Ant, you're going to do something kind of massive one day that's really going to come off, and we want to stay on the journey with you. And I'm like, that's how wonderful is that to hear? So it's good to process those feelings and understand them. But I was probably a bit, somber for a few days, and then I was like, right, time to pull the socks up and let's get going. What's the next thing? And start kind of researching, and having the support of people like that, even when you have let them down, gives you the confidence to be able to do that.
Given that we are in the confessional and we're meant to exchange truths, I think I've said this to you, but I want to see if we'll come on to the new thing you're doing, which is to super validation of everything you said about winners win. Ultimately, it's just maybe the timing that you don't predict. Do you think that this optimism was or is something that comes from a personality that maybe got ahead of itself and needed a little bit of a, Mr. Arena, everything does not always work out, and you just had that moment when you and I were, working together? What I'm saying is, did your things always worked out for you really well? You've always been a winner in life. Was that something that at the end of the day maybe was an obstacle for you to overcome in a difficult moment?
Yeah, look, certainly for a period of time, definitely. It's like you can't go through that type of experience and not be knocked around a little bit by it. I think I heard this phrase that I really loved. It's like, some people are about the journey and some people are about the destination. And maybe neither of those things are right. It's who you become on the journey that is the most important thing. And when I heard that, I was like, I actually stopped for a second in my tracks, and I was like, it was around that time, and I was like, oh, who am I now versus who was I at the beginning of the journey? What have I learned? And also, like, what are the experiences that I had along the way that I'll always cherish? Like, I got to travel around the world. I got to speak at conferences. One of our favorite stories is I was flying around so much to different things, and I had to get from Amsterdam to Lake Como for a certain summit that's in September every year. And I was so sick of airplanes, and I had one of my COO with me, who still is one of my closest friends. And so I just organized, paid for this personally, and we walk out of the hotel, and there was this very nice red Ferrari. And he said, oh my God, look at that car. And so I already had the key. I hit the button. I said, I told him before we were traveling around Europe for 2 weeks. And I said, just pack everything into a backpack, can you? And he was like, what? I'm known notoriously for carry on only, but this was next level. And so we jumped in this car, and, which we will never buy and own and whatever. It's not our sort of flavor anyway. But man, it was fun. And we drove through Amsterdam, through Germany on the Autobahn and through the Alps. And I will cherish those sort of 2 days I think we took to go down with one of my closest mates. And we had an absolute blast. And so that's the stuff I stopped and reflected on and said, well, win or lose, man, I learned a bucket load. I became smarter, wiser, a better relationship builder. all of these things. So there's so many positives to take out of it, as opposed to what is it that you really want from success out of a startup or a tech startup, and is it money? Well, okay, look, that was never my motivator to do something. It's about doing things that most people would never even have a crack at. And I certainly did that. And I knew that I'd learned enough to take, a ton of experience and knowledge into something else in the future. But don't get me wrong, I was pretty sorry for myself for a little while there, Rog.
Yeah. I do remember that incident with the Ferrari coming through the Autobahns of Germany as we were preparing for the summit in the middle of all the pressure of the day before. This WhatsApp arrives from Brendan, the friend you're talking about there, in the car, recording as you going over the 300 kilometre an hour mark. We're so on our way. Yeah, it is. No, the thing I want to, the thing I'm just very curious about, because I'm obviously more experienced in the sports industry than you, and I was watching you pretty much right on your shoulder for all those years. And I saw you getting in to rights holders at a senior level and having a success of connection, of empathy, of, yes, we must do something together. That is not normal. I can tell, I've told you this, it's not normal. And whilst also I thought, hey, I never know, maybe this guy, Ant Arena, is the one that's different and shortens the whole sales cycle. At the end of the day, sport didn't let you get away with that. My takeaway is that that's sport's fault as opposed to yours. But, on reflection, what would your commentary be now on anybody that is looking to sell into the sports industry? What would your mentoring be to them?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Yeah, look, I think the things even for me to have where I think I could have had more success would have been relocating out of Australia, like parking myself in London or in New York. There was things like that I certainly looked at. And then the timing wasn't right with COVID and, relocating, the family at those times was kind of really tricky. But I think that definitely would have helped. I've 100% focused on the relationship side of things. I've always prided myself on, I can have a really good conversation with the receptionist or the EA or the guy cleaning the floor. And if he needs a hand, I'll help him out. And then I can step into a boardroom and talk balance sheets and technology and all the things that you want to do. I've always enjoyed that. And, I landed a big deal with the NBA many, many years ago. And people said, how on earth did you get the NBA? And I said, well, the NBA is not a thing. It's just a bunch of human beings, And so if you can have a conversation with a human, you can get anywhere. My advice to anyone wanting to do that, moving into that space, is exactly that. Just remember, these are just people, and those people have hopes and dreams and responsibilities and things that they're trying to get out of life as well. The more you can understand that, that's a really tricky thing to do, I think, especially in sport, is you can build a great relationship, you can get to know the person, but you may not always understand the full story of what's going on in their office, behind that closed door and the pressure that they're under. And that can be difficult for those people to communicate really clearly about. I don't think there's any malicious intent in that. So that's the tricky thing, and that's the challenge and the opportunity. I was also, I'm going to think, because it is the confessional. I think what the sport industry can do is take something that can be a really cool idea and kind of dumb it down to like lowest common denominator sort of stuff where, when everyone talks fan engagement these days, and it's like, we did a poll and a quiz and a this and a that. I had people trying to push us into that area, and I was like, I'm just not going to do it. This is not what I want for my life, to just to get a signature on a piece of paper and put a product that it's not. I'm a big sports fan, and I thought, I'm not going to engage with this. Why would I ever create things that expect other people to do that? I wanted to deliver something that was going to blow people's socks off. And they said, well, this is what I was waiting for in sport. And so that, I think, is also the challenge for anyone coming into sport, is just have that expectation. If you can iterate along the way, which we didn't get to do because of COVID, we might have learned some different lessons, and we still would have built 100%, still would have built a big platform that kind of could have changed things. but we would have done it in a very, very different structure in a different way. One of the key guys at the NBA said to me at one point, he's like, look, your stuff is actually incredible. It's next generation stuff. If I take that, you're going to be 70% of our tech stack. And he goes, you're a small startup from Australia. I just can't do that. And I just remember going, but that was the dream and the vision, is to try and, get into the biggest and the best and kind of swing for the fences, right? I'm not the guy, I don't know what analogy there is in different sports, but, and I'm not even into baseball.
To take a single, you're swinging for the 6. You're not taking a single.
I'm going for the 6. 100%. Because that's kind of what life's about, right? I have this overarching philosophy, Rog. I think you know enough about this, about me. I had a meeting today, an all-staff meeting. I said, guys, we're on a big ball of dirt and we're flying through space and we're all going to die. So we might as well just try and have some fun while we're here. Try and do something really cool. Try and change the game. Be cool to people. Be friendly. And some good things will happen along the way. That's kind of the philosophy, and it's kind of worked out so far.
That's fantastic. We could probably take 3 hours to talk about the various examples of that being true from my eyes. Whether it's the boat going through Sydney Harbour with the barbecues there and people swimming below and shouting about sharks, and you having a very high pressure call with lawyers about a certain deal. I'll always remember that afternoon. It was super cool and what I would call proper Aussie brand. That was something to witness, I must admit.
Yeah, good. I'm happy to fly the flag.
Listen, let's go on to question 2. What's the deal you wish you hadn't done?
Okay. I did a deal at the beginning of COVID with an investment bank in the US, and I really wish I did do that deal. If you're going to work with an investment bank in the US, don't pick one in LA that turns out they're all really good actors. That's kind of the way I think I can put it. I got, hook, line and sinker, very charming, very charismatic. It kind of leads to the next question, I think, but like charisma and competence are not the same thing, and so that deal had a big impact on me, on the business, on, I got some really cool life experiences out of it. But that's the one I wish I didn't do.
So to put colour on that, I'm not naming any names or anything, but you came across, because people listen to this and they're in the same moment. They're looking to raise funds. They come across advisory houses, placement agents, fundraisers, and they believe them because they're, as you say, they're very believable. Your experience with this one was quite dramatic in that the personalities went from being super sweet and soft and lovely to being hardball American legal very, very quickly. And I think you found that quite jarring.
Yeah, look, to be fair, actually, I think I was the one that drove that because, I'm not going to name any names here, but I think that's the business model is, the song and dance, make all these promises, get the paperwork in front of you. And, when they didn't deliver in this instance, and then they've still got their kind of hooks in the business, I was not happy about that. And I am, right or wrong, I will fight tooth and nail for things that I think are right and equitable. I'll always do the right thing by people. This felt very, very deceptive and misleading, and I was not sort of having a bar of it, basically. So it was me that said, well, there's a clause in this agreement that says we go to court. And I think probably 999 times out of 1,000, small startups don't, because, it's a full-on process, and it was a full-on process. But I was pretty adamant that, I didn't want these guys on the cap table.
Yeah. For question 3, which is who is the person you wish you never met, do you have a different one from the one from the investment bank? Anybody you can think of?
No, Tim. No, look, honestly, I mean, to your point, like, I mean, I don't know if you got someone in mind. You kind of look like you do, but yeah, no, look, I mean, there's things that, like, it's not as drastic as I wish I never met them and blah, blah, blah. But I've been let down by people. Was let down by staff that, certainly from a technology perspective, who made promises about their capabilities and their skill set, and their delivery timeframes and all those sorts of things. And they didn't, and there might be a bunch of factors kind of around that. But, those things I'm like, oh God, man, this would have been an easier journey if, this person wasn't here or that didn't happen or whatever. So there's certainly elements like that. But, outside of that, like some of the things I've touched on, I tend to just kind of cherish the relationships and the people that you meet along the way. Kind of sometimes even with the stuff with the investment bank, like some of the best learnings I ever had, came from that experience, and that ran for years. I learned a whole lot of things of what not to do and how to be mindful and how to read contracts a particular way, and all that sort of stuff became, really valuable lessons. So it's kind of difficult for me to even kind of begrudge. I think I told you about this, what happened at the end of this. Did I tell you what I did?
Don't think.
Yeah.
I can't, but it depends what it is. I don't know. I heard a lot of them about them.
There's a certain company that makes like gummies, that just normal lollies in the shape of a dick, and it's called a bag of dicks. And so if you don't like someone, you can send them a bag of dicks. That's what I did.
Wonderful.
It was a joke. It was trying to lighten it at the end of that whole experience when we were all settled and done and it was all put to bed.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a pleasant experience. It definitely wasn't. And finance can get very, very nasty, and it is a game of people who are absolutely vicious. And that's the point I wanted to ask you a little bit again on confessing this. Are you too nice a guy, Ant? And the reason I ask that is you mentioned your staff there. I remember when I came to Australia and I was coming for that strategy day that we did in the Blue Mountains. And I think Brendan was quite early on in his journey as well with you. And I remember going to Brendan afterwards and I was saying, there's a lot of change that needs to happen here. Do you think you're too nice to have cut what you needed to cut once the gears were changing in Aura?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's a lesson learned. I mean, I don't think I would probably be a lot different the next time round. And, there's a saying, it's hire slow, fire fast. So true. I always want to see the best in people. I want to see people succeed. I want to believe them that they can accomplish things. And but yeah, I 100% went too far, I think, in that and believed in people way too much. And then was invariably kind of let down. But yeah, I remember you saying that a lot at that time, and you were right. You know what I mean? And I think I was way too nice kind of about it, or whether it's too nice or just wanting to believe that those people could overcome the challenges that they had and succeed. Moving forward, I mean, I think I've got a different approach to that sort of stuff, because sometimes I think if it's not working for that person, the best thing you can do for them is to say, hey, this is not working, and they move on to something else, and and they might thank you later. I've had a couple of people do that over the years.
I'm a fair bit older than you, and I think my experience in this whole area is that people like you who always bounce back and who always say, now what's next? They don't perceive that easily that 80% of people are not of that character. They are in one gear, they're going in one direction, and in the main, they won't change and they can't change. And people like you give them too much credit that you will lead them to change their behaviors, and they never change because they can't. Now, that sounds arrogant, but that's one of the great lessons in business. Do not overestimate the bulk of your staff. They are where they are, and you are where you are for a specific reason. And leaders sometimes miss that point.
Yeah, I absolutely miss that. Because, I mean, this is maybe a strange way to put it, but I think I always viewed myself as just like a normal person. I'm like, everyone's just the same as me. And so I had this fire in the belly, okay, if I'm not good at something, I'm going to go work it out and I'm going to overcome it and I'm going to get really good at that, whatever that might be. But it has taken me a few years through that journey to go, actually, because you are right. I don't think it's arrogant to say that, but not everyone's cut from that cloth. And that cloth is not the right thing for everyone, right? Do you know what I mean? I am I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. And I've got the skills and the abilities and the attitude and energy and all those things to be who I've been and will continue to be. And that's not for everyone. And, I had how many people said to me, I can't wait to work in a tech startup. And then, they don't show up in the way that you kind of would expect in that, and they don't deliver on that time frame. So, I think it's probably that stuff where you're like seeing through, not that it's bullshit, but, and I don't think, again, it's not malicious, but it's kind of like, this is what I thought I wanted. Oh God, no, I need a safety kind of corporate job over here where I don't have, these high pressures and that high pressure environment and things like that. So it's being able to read that, and read between the lines of what someone says and then what actually is their behavior and their output. And not say, well, your output might change, because it probably won't. That's the lesson, right? It's just like, this is not the right gig, Yeah. And I've had people like around that, there's a bunch of people from Aura that are now working in SurfLab. And people that said, I'll take a pay cut where I am now to come work with you again in this business because of like the culture and the thing. And they're the ones that actually like work their ass off and are world class and, have phenomenal skills. And then there's other people that, it doesn't matter if like, I just wouldn't hire them again.
Yeah. I'm going to go into question 4. And okay, I made a little bit of a joke about basketball earlier, but you are an incredibly competitive person. So I want to ask you, what train, incredibly competitive, absurdly competitive, even such that when you lose, you will try and change the narrative to say that you actually won?
I know what you're talking about.
Thinking about pool in New York,
yeah,
yes,
I am.
yes.
Yeah.
What train do you think you missed or were late for in life?
Oh, I think that question in that context is super interesting. Look, from a business perspective, I think I was straight out of uni and I was like, go. I've got stuff I need to achieve. And I missed the train of like going and living in London or New York or somewhere, anywhere, Hong Kong, like somewhere around the world outside of Australia.
Calabria. Yeah.
Calabria would have been great. My dad would have loved that. It's like kind of like nothing humbled me more than, an ambitious Australian, like realizing nobody in Europe gives a shit about your pitch deck when you're from Australia. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, and I think having the experience of living abroad when I was in my 20s and having fun and taking like a gap year, I did none of that. I did 2 degrees at uni, like at the same time, marketing and economics, and then I was straight into work. And I went really hard. I had felt this, my dad's Italian. He was a bricklayer. He worked his ass off, his whole life in construction, and it was like, go make your money with a pen, and you've got to do this, and you like very traditional, you've got to provide for one day you'll get married and you'll have kids and you need to be set up, and kind of ingrained me with that to the point that I was like, I don't have time to go and enjoy life at that time. Now, so that's just kind of on that side of things, a mistrain. But man, I had a lot of fun playing basketball, and I was good. I don't know how far I could have got. I was definitely in the wrong time, I think, for potential wrong time, wrong place. But or maybe I'm just not as good as I thought I was. But it used to bring me so much joy to get out in between those lines, and I was quick and I was athletic, and I had a sense of joy and freedom that I couldn't find in other areas of my life when I played. I played a lot of Aussie rules as well, and I kind of had a similar feeling there. It was, there was sort of some structure, but some creativity and some physicality and the competitiveness and all those sorts of things. There's parts of me that wish that, I had a different journey there. And like the game now is very different to what it was. And I was like too short for that. I literally had coaches say, if only you were an inch or 2 taller, then when you would have made this team. And you're like, what does that have to do with anything? And now they don't care about that stuff. It's kind of definitely more of a skills-based game. And so I knew I didn't have certain, like I was quick and athletic, but I wasn't super tall. And so I worked on these other things, all these other skills. And there's a lot of hours put in, when no one was watching to try and all of a sudden it was like, oh, Ant, you've gotten much better. And so what could that have been? Who knows? I have this weird philosophy, Rog, that, there's a mixture between fate and free will. and that they're a little bit kind of intertwined. So I touched on this a moment ago, kind of by accident, but I am exactly who I was supposed to be for this life, right? I'm the right height, I'm the right personality, I'm the right all these things to probably have the types of lessons that I'm supposed to have. And maybe one of those lessons is you can work your ass off at something and maybe you don't quite get there, because that mirrors what's happened in some of the, with Aura, for example. But then there's other things where, I've felt a very natural inclination to work towards certain, whether it be businesses or outcomes, and it's just flowed so naturally, and I have been really successful. And so, being able to zoom out a little bit and read all of that has kind of given me a lot of peace, right? And it also gives you instinct moving forward to go, like the amount of times I've had a gut feel on things where I'm like, this feels right, I absolutely have to do it, or, ooh, this looks really, really good on paper, but I've got this weird feeling, or whatever that might be, tapping into that intuition, and I shouldn't do it. That's what you get, those types of skills from those types of experiences. So whether it's a mistrain or not.
Good answer.
Yes, yeah, there's things I wish I'd done, but it's maybe who I am today, and, the experience that I've had from all of those decisions.
Well, it is a very interesting conversation, this one, about destiny or whether you make your own luck and everything like that. I don't know the answer myself, but I tend to think it's more the second one. And my journey and part of the path with you would confirm that. And that's going to take me very much on to number 5. I don't know what your answer to number 5 is going to be. What sliding door were you just in time for? But before you answer, what I saw you do on the point of you make your own luck is that, you decide to move away from a very comfortable situation that you'd built in Canberra. I mentioned the bars earlier. Really, really interesting side hustle. And you decide to move to the Gold Coast, which is a pretty significant thing to do when your wife's got a career, when your children are getting to the later stages of school. You decide to go to the Gold Coast, and then things happen from there. I don't know if that's going to be your answer to question 5, but what is the sliding door you were just in time for?
Yeah, well, the key one I actually think about was the trajectory changing. All of the answers I kind of thought about for this were more work related, right? And kind of what set me on the journey in sport and tech, by the way. But we could touch on more of the life stuff too. I did the first deal that I did, there was an exit, sort of partial exit effectively from my agency into building out Aura as a tech company. That was a huge sliding door moment. To touch on the free will and making your own luck, I just had this weird gut feeling I was always going to land something like that. I was always going to do some sort of deal that was like, my family was not wealthy at all, still not, my immediate family and whatever else. And no one gave me a leg up. I started with nothing. But I remember thinking, oh, whatever this is, I'm going to overcome, and I'm going to something interesting is going to happen. I had that undying belief from when I was probably 10 years old. I felt this energy and this kind of vibrancy, and I'm like, it was always there and it was kind of going to come out. So sometimes in good ways, but then sometimes maybe not in good ways. But so the deal I did was it was by chance. There was a friend, I was living in Sydney. There was a friend that was from Canberra, which is where I grew up. She ended up getting a boyfriend. That boyfriend worked at the company. We were talking at a whole bunch of couples went away for a weekend. And we were chatting, and he's like, oh, what do you do? And I was telling him about some of the stuff we were doing in the agency. Next thing you know, I'm pitching to this, huge media company. And very shortly thereafter, I remember, and I'm happy to share on here, it doesn't faze me too much. I was in my, late 20s. Maybe late 20s, maybe 30. And, and I'm kind of trying, the agency's sort of ticking along, but, I've got maybe 30 or 40 grand in the bank, and I'm like, it's not enough. It's not where we need to be. I'm paying off a house and all this sort of stuff. And next thing I land this deal, and it came together so quickly. And then I turn around, look at my bank account, and there was millions of dollars in there. And that was I was in shock, for days upon days. That getting that deal over the line, having that conversation with this guy that I just met, then turning into a, come and see us in the office, show us what you're doing. And then a few months later, that shift gave me probably too much confidence, to be fair. But I was like, I just, I was in shock. I was like, this is not real. And then I was like, okay, I can deliver, I can execute, I can do some really cool things. So it gave me a lot of confidence to just keep going. Like, life's going to come to you if you just kind of continue on the path and keep trying hard and all that sort of stuff. So that is a massive sliding door moment for me. Because if I hadn't have done that, maybe I would have just sold the agency. Maybe I just would have got a job. I would have gone back into like corporate. That would have been a very, very, very different trajectory for me. So that was really quite life-changing. The move to the Gold Coast, honestly, is a bit like less so. I mean, I was in Sydney, went back to Canberra, just didn't have a great pregnancy with Ollie's, my eldest, who's now 6'1" and 15 years old, and it's pretty wild. So he's fine. But so we made a decision. It was right at the financial crisis, and let's go back. But it's kind of not where we wanted to be. But family was there. It was kind of easy. I started building the bars, which I kind of did that for a couple of reasons. It was, how do I make life fun and interesting? And I was trying to build a tech company, and I knew cash flow, and which is kind of crazy when I think about it now. But that was literally my thinking. Was I was Googling, best cash flow businesses.
No, that's such a great lesson. Cash flow businesses allow you to do loads of other stuff. It's the Warren Buffett lesson number one, and you got it early.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got the agency, and you look, in Canberra's certainly then not the most interesting place. And there was this great little speakeasy that I used to go to, and in Sydney, right near where I worked. And so when I moved to Canberra, I was like, one, I needed cash flow. And then two, I missed that kind of experience. I'm like, I'm going to build a speakeasy here. So found a spot, built the bar with like what little cash I had at that time. It paid me back in like 8 weeks, which was just insane. And, you know what I'm like? I'm like, oh, this shit's easy. It's like pay me back already. And then it was profitable. So
I do know what you're like.
Yeah. So I'll just build another one with the cash flow from the first one. And to be honest, it was great business. Like I still own a chunk of it. I sold a big piece of it last year, which was cool. But, it all of a sudden we had 6 in the group. They're doing like 15 mil in revenue. And it was just fun. It was a really fun business to be in, at a moment in time. I kind of feel too old for it now, to be honest. But, it was.
So how can you be too old? How can you be too old for bars and you've now become Mr. Surf in Australia? How does that happen? Because that's where that's for me, your sliding door. This is your destiny. What you're doing, not just with the sport, but how you're monetizing and organizing it. Everything that you learn, even the bad lessons in Aura, took you to this moment. Explain what happened. Explain what happened that you go to the Gold Coast, you walk along the beach, you decide you're going to take a lesson to where you are now with Surf Lab, because that is one of the great stories.
It's super cool. It's happened so quickly, right? So I moved to the Gold Coast. It's like, if anyone doesn't know, it's hot kind of year round. The water's warm. It's like surfing mecca. It's just really beautiful. So I'm like, right, I'm here. I'm going to learn to surf. So typical, I want to go the hardest, the best route that I can to kind of work this out. It's a very difficult sport to learn. So I find a company there, they do like these intensive, few day workshops. So I walk down to talk to the guy. He's like, there's a few people working there. They've got a big skate bowl. They've got some training area, all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, this feels legit, right? So he's like, well, we got one starting this weekend. Why don't you join in? And I'm like, yeah. He holds out an FPOS machine, and I'm like, I just tap it, and then I look, and it's like a few $1,000s. And I was like, oh shit, okay, we're in. Let's go. So I do the experience. I'm like clearly the worst surfer in that group that was doing it by a mile. Everyone else actually knows how to surf, but yeah, they're like, you're not going to drown, are you? I'm like, no, I'll be fine. I can swim. I actually I learned a lot, and I could start to kind of get some of the body movements in my head, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of piecing together how this might work. So I started hanging out with the sort of surf pro that's from the business. We're surfing every day or every couple of days, and I'm just improving really quickly. And I'm listening to the cues, and so we've become friends. We're talking. He says, "Oh, you've had a cool career with tech and sport, and we've got this whole online platform." And I'm like, "Nope, I did not know that." And he said, "Yeah, we have all these like subscribers." So this is kind of in my wheelhouse, right? So I'm like, okay. And he goes, that's not working as well as we want. So let me have a look at it. So I have a look at the tech and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you it's churning like crazy. And yeah, I think I know why. Okay. So he says, there's a bit of conflict with those two people that own the business. So I was like, okay, well, let me have a good look at it. Let me have a think about it. And I'm like, why don't I just buy this other guy out? So long story short, we negotiate a deal. I buy him out. I start looking at the industry a little bit more broadly. So in the business I bought, there's like 1,200 pieces of long form content. And I'm like, that'd be pretty handy to train like an AI model on. It's like all this kind of coaching summary stuff. And so my brain starts making these connections and these patterns. And then I realize in the surf industry, I'm certainly not whatever you called me before, the main surfing guy in Australia. But I saw a pattern where there's a bunch of like really cool businesses that sort of deliver to different parts of this ecosystem. And there tends to be someone that really knows their stuff really, really well. And then there's a partner that's kind of like the marketing or tech guy. And they tend to be okay, and they can get the business to a certain point, but then they hit a ceiling and then they don't know how to scale like above that point. That's kind of a pattern that I've noticed. So I was like, I think there might be a really interesting roll-up play here where you buy different parts of the ecosystem, you vertically integrate it. You can overcome, like I know what to do for the most part for the marketing and the scale from a technology perspective. So maybe I should have a look and see what else is out there and kind of speak to some people. Fast forward, in 6 months, I bought 4 companies quite cheap in the scheme of things and rolled them together into this vertically integrated surf training business that has a huge online presence. We have hundreds of thousands of people on the database. I have a content business, a coaching business, which is like basically the AI stuff, a physical training business that is an online platform around like strength conditioning and mobility, like all purely surf related. And look, because I had a strong career in sport and things like that, but it's all completely irrelevant for surfing. It's like it's a different type of fitness and things like that and strength. And then I bought probably Australia's largest surf travel business. And so what I did was I didn't buy 100% of these businesses. I bought out the partners that were like there's operational guys. I kept them in it that knew their stuff. And then the other people around, I kind of bought them out. So I'm in the process now of rolling that together under Surf Lab. There's 2 other deals I'm doing at the moment. One is in the surf media space, which is really important because I think there's I built a prototype from an AI perspective that can do some, mind-blowing things as you can do with AI these days. And that's just designed to lower the CAC and lift it out the lifetime value. And then there's an e-commerce play that, I'm negotiating that tomorrow morning. And once that's done, I'm very confident we'll get both of those deals done. Then that's the full ecosystem. So, we're now integrating technology across the group. So, for example, we can identify via a text quiz or by video upload where you're at in your surfing. So what kind of level you are. We put sort of 5 levels around it. And once we understand that, now we know what products and services to put in front of you. I know where you're going on holiday. I know what board you're on. I know if you've got an injury, where your strength and conditioning is up to. The AI coach can analyze your biomechanics through the AI computer vision modeling and let you know that your biomechanics at any point on the way where you are and where you need to be. So the next version, we built a prototype of that. The next version is a full 3D model that the AI can literally move your body around and twist you around and show you what position you need to be in to execute a better move kind of on that wave. So it's pretty groundbreaking technology certainly for surfing. It's really exciting that we're going to be launching all of this in the next kind of few months. So yeah, this has been a really fun thing, and so many learnings from the Aura side of things. Like, I have been lucky from the exit from the bars last year that I was able to sort of self-fund this. But we're getting the point and to the scale where we might take on a little bit of investment, nothing too crazy. And then take this thing to market, start, in Australia and the US. Half of our customers are already in the US, and then we'll sort of scale it from there.
This is an amazing story, because I want to share this with you the way we always used to talk and would bounce things back and forward. Because, over these last few years, I'm sure everybody, if they had to describe me, would say, oh, he's the guy that's bearish on the sports industry. He's always talking down the industry. He thinks everything's overvalued. And that's very unfair, because I always feel that there are massive opportunities around for investors. They're just not where you think they are. So when, I started following your story, obviously, I want to know more about that, because for the first thing you said, I managed to buy those businesses quite cheaply. What's the reason for that? And how do you define cheap as a multiple of or whatever?
So let me think of the right way to put this. Cheap's probably just something I can afford, I think. That probably makes sense. But the multiples I was able to do is less than 1 times EBITDA.
What?
Yeah.
They're giving you the business for a year's profits.
Yeah, because the thing I was talking about before, where you've got, there's a couple of people and it's not scaling, you tend to have either a little bit of tension or conflict, and someone just wants out. And so
there's the lesson. There's the lesson about how you do great investing. It's always how you get in. And normally it's around exactly that. So you for luck, I call it destiny. I call it you're making your own luck. You find a passion you want to get involved in. Your mind takes about 3 seconds to work out that there's a business here. Tell me about this. So this is a subscriber business in the main. There's people that pay money to be involved in the sport that they're passionate about. They're paying cash each month.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Although I'm playing around with the pricing model, because I don't think the subscriber model's right. I've seen the subscriptions kind of in everything, and what we're playing around at the moment is that we just put a price on the course. There's you can split the stuff up into these little chunks, but then what I'll do is we'll have we must have 100 and something products that we sell effectively, digital products, and so we will do the product on a per unit price and then do a membership to the ecosystem. So a bit like a Costco model, if you're familiar, right? So you pay, and that might be more of a subscription, right? So it's a $15 a month membership that gives you access to the ecosystem, and you get a discount on each of those products. So if you're buying one product, don't worry about the membership. If you're going to buy a few things and you're on a journey to improve, then you should definitely buy that membership, because you're going to save a lot of money. But we build up the annuity based off of that. And because we have the whole ecosystem, our model's more around just cross-selling into the other products, right? So, for example, you book a surf trip with us. Well, we know where you're going. We know when you're going. So 6 weeks before, you should start a strength and conditioning program to make sure you're ready for that trip. And you're going to the Maldives, where it's a different type of wave to what you surf at home. You should buy a new board, and we're going to have that ready for you right before you go on that trip. And by the way, this wave is a different structure of wave to what you're used to. So here's a course on how to manage that wave.
Yeah, I get that.
You get it, right? So that's more the model than subscription. It's just moving people through that ecosystem.
No, okay, I get that. But the thing that struck me when, I was reading a little bit about this, and I just think this is so true, and my head's changed quite a lot in the last 3-4 years about the sports industry. You said sport is community. I think that's directly from Surf Lab. What do you mean by that? And what are the implications for that in terms of how big sport is setting itself out these days, and what your experience of what you're building is?
Yeah. Well, look, I've worked with all the, and certainly gotten to know a lot of the big sporting leagues all over the world. As you know, I'm optimistic generally, but I'm pessimistic about sport's future in a similar way that you might be. For the example of my son is 15, plays basketball, loves basketball, never watched a game in his life. Never.
Yeah.
Never will.
Yeah.
He's not even, to be honest, he's not even interested in the highlights. He kind of he loves it because he gets to hang out with his mates. He's playing at a decent level, all that sort of stuff, but that's just not what it's kind of about. And I think that is a shift in demographic, that there's a cliff that is absolutely coming. So the community aspect's super important. I mean, I can look at things like the WSL, which is the surfing league. I think they want to sell it at the moment. It's at a fraction of the money that's been put into it. That's not a great place to be from that perspective, I think, investing. But the community and the grassroots and helping people enjoy their lives more, I think, is a really interesting, a much more lucrative space that you can kind of get into. But the other thing I think, and this is where it's tricky for investors, because for the last, 20 years, all the talk is you just need a unicorn, right? It's just got to make $1 billion. Like even for SurfLab, I got introduced to some VCs, and they're like, well, tell me how this business gets to $3 billion so you can return the fund.
It doesn't ever get to $3 billion, and it's still a great business.
Yeah,
you change and invest on that. It's so true, Anne. It's so true. They don't see that. It's just so true. Man.
It's crazy, right? So, obviously, I'm not going to waste my time, with most VCs that think in that particular way, and that's just we just don't match their thesis. But I also think with AI that's coming, there's kind of no moat for a lot of things. So I think you need some in real life, some of these rich experiences that kind of give you a point of difference to anything that can now be copied like that, right? And so maybe the next round of investors should be looking at things like, what's the application layer, where the exit might be $200 million versus I need to find $1 billion constantly. Maybe I can get a whole bunch of businesses at a smaller level that are really good, sustainable businesses that own a piece of the market. I mean, we could scale massively because the tech that we've created, in particular around actually the computer vision modeling and how we train that AI model on a balanced sport on a board, I can lift and replicate into snowboarding, skating, foiling, and you just start kind of adding these, so we might do that.
Sports.
Community, but using technology, you call it and people are spending a bunch of money on these things. Like you want a new foil, if you've got the electric ones, it's it's $25,000, so people have money, it's affluent, there's money to be made. But, the surfing's pretty fun for now.
Yeah. Last question, Anne. What person do you owe most to in life, but you haven't told them enough?
I think it's tricky on the told them enough because I tend to be pretty transparent with people. That's certainly when I'm thankful for things. I thought about this. I've actually kind of got, it's not one person, I've got four that I think about. One is a guy named Mike Reddington, who probably doesn't understand maybe the impact he had on me. Mike was this old guy that, he'll hate me saying that, by the way, but worked at the first ad agency that I worked in out of university. And he hated everyone, and he just sold the company. He was on an earn out into a big public group, and he used to sit in the corner, and he had this grumpy, Stadler and Waldorf from the Muppets. That he reminds me of one of those.
Grant and I get called that. Grant Williams and I get called that.
He kind of hated everything. And I walked in and 20s. I've got my slip-on leather loafers and a fancy shirt or some shit, a blazer, and I knew he just loathed me right away. I was like, I got to win this guy over. Anyway, I get into the job. I went in at a reasonably, not too senior, but senior sort of role. So I had a few people in the team, and I was working across strategy, and I worked out pretty quickly that there was a lot of people in advertising, certainly in the early 2000s, which is around this time frame, mid 2000s, that were there because they thought it was glamorous and it was going to be fun and lots of parties and shit like that, and it was. But there was a business to be run at the same time. And so he was like, this person and that person and how much money you're making this month. And that's how he used to talk all the time. And so at one point I was sort of a little frustrated with the team, early, maybe 6 or 8 weeks in. So I called everyone into a meeting and he snuck into this meeting. And I said, right, you guys just think that everything's parties and fun and all this sort of stuff. I said, but you need to know more about your client's business than they know about their business. If you're not doing that, it's not going to work, right? I said, our job, what do you think our job is? And someone's like, oh, we're going to produce this spreadsheet or do this or whatever. So no, our job is to sell the work. Like whether you guys like it or not, our job is to sell the work. And he just jumps up out of the back of the room and he goes, that's fucking right. That's right. This guy, he understands what's going on. You guys have got to learn to sell the work. And ever since that moment, him and I, we just connected really, really well. He taught me so much stuff about business, about life, about marketing. We used to go hang out, like go to lunch all the time, whatever else. And I'm still close to him to this day. And that's 25 years ago. And I don't think I told him so much about the impact, but we became such good friends. And like I said, that the lessons I got from him set me up for a lot of stuff kind of later on. So Mike was awesome. The second person really quickly is a guy named Jeff Howard. Jeff was the CFO at AYNE that did the media deal. And he, he just believed in me and he believed that I could kind of pull off, and that I was, had the ambition and the drive and the energy to make it happen. He ended up leaving AYNE, went to Channel 7, one of the major broadcasters, ended up as CEO. We're still friends to this day. We catch up for dinner all the time. And like he also, same sort of thing, backed me. And then the last two are two of the investors that I had in Aura that were just unwavering in their support for me. I won't name them out of just kind of respect for them, but and now they're backing me into like I said, to these next things and want to be basically, want to be a part of it and how can they sort of stay in touch. And I think, the lesson I got from like every ambitious person just needs a few people in life that are willing to listen to completely unreasonably optimistic ideas and say, maybe. That's the thing, right? Rather than those kind of hard no's. And that's what I got from those people is like, maybe that's possible and maybe it will go right instead of wrong. And if you can find some of those, they're amazing people to hold on to.
Wonderful. And Arena, thank you for coming into the Confessional. You're an example to many people, not just in everything you've said here, but what you're doing in your personal life and how you lead your family. As a good Italian patriarch, I love that, as you can imagine. So travel well, surf well, and we'll see you very soon, hopefully in Como.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rog. I really appreciate it.